Cam Rising confirmed he did tear his ACL, but will he be ready to go by the time the Florida game rolls around? We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. On today's show, we're going to be diving in and talking about Cam Rising, reacting to him officially confirming that it was an ACL injury. Also talk about Brian Johnson, who's going to be Philly's next offensive coordinator, according to Adam Scheffner. A little bit more on the Andy Ludwig situation and finishing off with some Utah women's basketball talk. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and joining me for today's show to break down all the news and a lot more, it's friend of the show and UteZone contributor, Sammy Morra. And Sammy, look, a lot of people were speculating, theorizing. There's a lot out there. Yeah, that Cam tore his ACL. You hear the official word from him. You heard him talk about it last week with Bill Riley on ESPN 700. Just a little bit more from Cam on it. He said he hopes to be fully ready to go by the beginning of the season. He says, just up to me. I got to make sure I'm doing everything that I can to make sure I'm ready for fall camp and then get ready once the season comes around. So will he be ready to go by that Florida game? As of right now, I'm going to say yes, just because I want to believe in Cam Rising. But also, I mean, the average time for ACL injuries like this is a lot of times is 9 months. Now, athletes have beat that and done better than that. We've seen phenomenal stories before about how guys are able to accelerate that process. So I think there's a chance he can definitely do it. I want to believe he can do it, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if someone else has to start that first game, that being Nate or Bryson, because look, ACL injuries are really difficult.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
Yes.
That's where I'm gonna put it. I I think that we're gonna see Cam next season. I think like no matter what.
Yep.
But it's just interesting if he does suit up in that first game versus Florida, and even if he does, like if it gets out of hand in Utah on either side, I could see Utah being like, okay, we're gonna whatever this is. This motion I'm doing with the fishing rod. We're gonna reel you back
Yes.
in.
Yeah.
We're gonna reel you back in a little bit just to keep like healthy because I personally, in my opinion, you want to keep him healthy for that Baylor game. That's
Mhm.
from where I sit. I think that's more of a like toss-up game in my opinion. I know it's so easy, like so early to say those kind of things, but like looking at how depleted Florida is going to be heading into this next season,
I agree.
I think it's a lot more more winnable for Utah this time around.
For sure.
But that Baylor game is very important, I think. So if you get that Baylor game and then like sit him for the SUU game,
Mhm.
or is SUU or is it Weber?
It's actually Weber this year, but yeah, but
Weber.
it's the same. It's the same
Whatever
thing.
that
Yeah, it's the
whatever
same
that
thing.
FCS game is, just
Yeah.
sit him for that one.
Mhm.
So like sit him for Weber and let Nate or Bryson take it
Yep.
over. And like then you keep him healthy heading into Pac-12 play, which I think is going to be they did not do Utah any favors with the
Nope.
schedule this year. Like they said, "Oh, you're the Pac-12 champs. We're gonna give you everything we have, and
Yes.
that's it." So you're gonna play USC, you're gonna play Oregon, Washington, and UCLA.
And
And
going
so
to Oregon State
and Oregon and
on a
go
short
to
week.
on a short week where they're introducing their new stadium.
Yeah.
Like it is setting up for a spooky Friday night in Corvallis. Friday, Thursday, whatever day of the week game it is, like a short week game.
Yeah.
Like it's setting up for like
It's in
not a
October
good
too.
time. Yeah, it's in October. Not a good time in Corvallis this year. um but I think you just kind of I think we're going to see how it goes as fall,
Mhm.
like as we get closer to fall camp. Obviously, like there's no way he's going to be practicing in spring.
Nope.
So I think it's going to be very, very, very fun to see who wins the Bryson Nate quarterback battle in that spring practices. I mean, I have someone that I think would be a little bit like who I want to see in that position as QB2, but you
Who's
know,
that?
I would love to see Nate Johnson.
I agree. I agree. Yeah.
I
I thought
think
you were gonna
Nate
throw out like a wild card candidate. I'm
Oh yeah,
totally. I
Mac
want to see Nate.
Howard. Mac
Yeah. Yeah.
Howard's gonna be QB2 in the spring. Yeah, no. I think I would personally like to see Nate as QB2.
Mhm.
I just I just love Nate's game. I think he's
Agree.
so great. Like he's a we haven't seen him pass a lot, obviously, but like as a runner, like you
He's
see how
dynamic.
like he's very dynamic, and I think
Mhm.
that he is going to be that like that jolt of energy that I think Utah
Mhm.
lacked at times last year. I mean, you saw it in towards the end of the season when they started running his packages. Like he was like a breath of fresh air on that field at times.
Makes
So
sense.
I personally would love to see Nate back in there as QB2. It's gonna be another full spring for him. He's had a couple of games he's played, and he still maintained his red shirt. Like, he's in a great position to take that QB2 job. And, like, we've seen what Bryson can do. I mean, you have, like, his performance in the Rose Bowl in, like, 2 years ago, which was, like well, it wasn't 2 years ago, it was, like, in 2022.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was in
like,
2022. Mhm.
I
It's weird Rose Bowl timing.
it's weird, but, like, yeah, so it's like you had his performance in the Rose Bowl, which was, like, that's, like, great what he did,
Mhm.
but then, like, you look at it compared to, like, the Washington State game this year, which is, like that was, like I'm not saying subpar, but, like, it was a struggle at times.
It was what
Like
Bryson more so is. He's a
yeah,
game manager. He can
mhm.
contribute and help you win games against Pac-12, but when you're matched up with the elite of the elite and it comes down to more than just one drive, that's who Bryson is. I mean, I think
Mhm.
we're both on the same page in terms of we want to see what Nate can become because we both know, and I think all Utah fans know, Nate's ceiling is a lot higher for a
Nate is the
reason.
future. Nate is
Mhm.
the future. I say with, like, a lot of, like not, like, confidence, but I have a lot of faith that when Cam leaves, this is gonna be Nate Johnson's program. Um, just just if you look at his athletic ability, his
Mhm.
size, his speed, like, it's the making of another, like, amazing quarterback for Utah. Like, he's
Agreed.
gonna be great, and I think I love Bryson. I think he's a great guy, and he is a good player, but at the same time,
A
like,
really good backup.
really good backup, but at the same time, like, yeah, you said he's kind of a game manager, like and the
Mhm.
other thing is with like, Utah has ki and, like, here's my thing, the way that
Mhm.
college football is moving now is we're moving like, it's not moving, it already is at that point where pocket passers just don't thrive,
Mhm.
and I feel like Bryson is more of that pocket passer who, if he has to run, he will, because you can see at times he's stiff when he's running, he's
Mhm.
not very, like he's athletic in it, but it's not, like, the same type of athleticism as if it was, like, Nate running or, like,
Yep.
Cam or, like, even Tyler Huntley if you go back to that, like and I think that's where college football is moving. I mean, you're already seeing it in the NFL. Like, how many pocket passers are left now that Brady's retired?
Exactly. They're very
Like,
dwindling very
probably
quickly.
like you have like Aaron Rodgers, and like that's probably it.
Yeah, like a Kirk Cousins and
Yeah,
those
you have
guys.
like Aaron
That's
Rodgers and Kirk
football.
Cousins. You have like
Mhm.
two
Yeah.
out of 32 teams.
Mhm.
So it's like the way that the NFL is moving. The NFL is finally catching up to what college football is doing,
Yeah.
and it's like, hey, like the future is mobile quarterbacks, and I think Nate is that mobile quarterback. And I know this got very off topic of Cam and his ACL injury if he gets back, but, like, I think, like, realistically, like, yeah, but, like, you have to think that there's gonna be some, like, limitations on it. Like, I'm not saying wrap him in bubble wrap and put him out there, but, like, you need to make sure that he's healthy for the games that,
Yeah.
like, truly, truly, truly matter. Like, yeah, Florida and yeah, Baylor are important, but, like, if you wanna go three-peat in the Pac-12, you need to win that
Yes.
Oregon, you need to win that USC, you need to win that UCLA, you need to win that Washington, like, you need to win that Oregon State game, like we even mentioned, like, you need to come in and you need to win those conference games, and, like, I think, like, we've seen it with Cam before, he's won those big games before,
Yes.
so what's to say he doesn't win them again? But I I'm optimistic that he'll be back for Florida if he is back for Florida, but he's not, like, 100%, like, you're gonna see a lot of subs in of him and Nate. You're gonna see a lot more
Mhm.
of the Nate packages. You're gonna see a lot more creative ways. You're gonna see Jaquindon Jackson in as a wildcat. Like you're gonna see
Yes.
like different ways to run things because of Cam's health.
Mhm.
So that was a very roundabout and long explanation as to like my reasoning behind maybe. Um, but yeah, that's where I feel about
Mhm.
this ACL situation.
Yeah, well, the next thing we're gonna talk about is do we have how much faith do we have in Bryson and Nate, which you basically exactly said how much
Mhm.
faith you have, and I feel the same way. Look, if Bryson is let's say Bryson wins the job. I fully believe that Bryson at leading this Utah offense can help this team beat Florida at home. I don't see Bryson then going in down to Waco and beating Baylor. When wow, because like I said, we just know what he is versus Nate Johnson. I can see a world where he shocks the world and does that. I
Mhm.
wouldn't exactly bet. I feel like more than likely what's going to happen if Cam can't go the first 3 weeks is Utah will go 2-1. I do think they'll be able to beat Florida in a good team performance. There's just, like I said, there's a lot of disarray in that program.
Mhm.
Graham Mertz is the definition of a roller coaster quarterback, and he's not going to have a kind of performance that we saw from Anthony Richardson last year,
Yeah.
where he just decimated this Utah defense. So, yeah, I have a lot more trust in Nate. I hope he wins the job, but either way, hopefully Cam is healthy. If Cam, I should say healthy with an asterisk, because I expect if Cam's ready to go for these first couple games, it's going to look a lot more like the Cam we saw during Arizona and Stanford Cam, who was still good, but like you could just see missed throws and a couple things where you're like,
Mhm.
that's not the Cam I saw versus USC. And then by the time we got to the USC game again, and in the first half against Penn State in the Rose Bowl, that's who Cam Rising really was. So it's going to be
Yeah.
very interesting to see how all the health of this shakes out, Sammy.
And I will say, like, you always see rust in that first game. Like,
Mhm.
you're gonna see that time and time
Yes.
again. But here's something that I just thought of. Nate Johnson could be the Anthony Richardson of this game this year.
Yeah, in
Because
terms of breaking
Florida,
tackles, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
well, in
not the same
Florida,
like body build, but yeah,
no, Florida doesn't have film on him.
that's true. There was some film on Anthony Richardson
There's
because he played some games asking
there
for,
was a
but I get
slim pickings. There was a slim
yes,
pickings of film on him. There's a slim pickings of film on Nate right now.
it is a sliver. You're right.
So by that logic, Nate could be the Anthony Richardson of this game if Nate plays.
Mhm.
So that's just something for
I
people
like
to
it.
ponder because, like, everyone was like, well, if we would have had more film on Anthony Richardson, we could have beat Florida because by the end of the season, Florida was like
Yeah.
shambles.
I mean, yes, nowhere
So,
near. Yeah.
yeah, so I think like, that's a long stretch for me to compare Nate Johnson to Anthony Richardson, but like if
But
you're
I get what you're
talking in
saying in
terms
terms of, yes, the
in
experience level and in terms of also, I do think in very different ways, they have the ability to make guys miss and break tackles. Nate more so with his quickness versus Anthony can just straight up run you
he
over
was
and
just
still go
physical.
to. Yeah. I mean, there was a reason. A lot of people were calling him Cam Newton. He did not live up to that comparison
Oh,
over the
no,
course
he
of
did
college
not.
football season.
He said, Cam Newton, I'm gonna go the opposite direction on
Opposite
that.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be really interesting to see what NFL team decides to end up doing with that whole decision as they'll have a chance to draft him. And speaking of the NFL, we're going to talk about Brian Johnson, who's going to be Philly's next offensive coordinator in a moment. But first, want to talk to you guys about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to the point scores and threes drained. As you guys know, NBA season right at that midway point. So All-Star game is here. You guys can head over to FanDuel, check out some of their All-Star game bets. And of course, after the All-Star game, tons of great NBA slated games coming up as we wind down, getting closer and closer to the playoffs. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Sammy, looking at to the NFL now, Brian Johnson was everyone's dream candidate if Andy Ludwig had gone on to become the offensive coordinator of Notre Dame. That's not going to happen. We'll actually talk about that in a moment a little bit more. But Brian Johnson, I think a lot of us knew that wasn't going to be the case, especially because Brian's just done such a great job in Philly. When you look at Jalen Hurts' turnaround, Brian Sheen, I believe that's his last name, is the new head coach of the Colts. He deserves a lot of credit for that too. But Jalen has talked specifically about how great his relationship with Brian Johnson
Mhm.
is. And when you can get an offensive coordinator and head coach that is so in sync, I think that's a great thing. This is a great opportunity for Brian that he's going to be the offensive coordinator in Philly. Adam Schefter reported earlier in the week. He said that Brian Johnson he was really sought after by multiple teams for offensive coordinator positions, and it was respected if Sheen would leave that he would become Philly's offensive coordinator. He has now reported take that to the bank. So this is a great opportunity for Brian Johnson, a Utah legend who's worked his way up the ranks. And if he balls out if the Philly offense balls out this next year with the way NFL coaching changes work, I think especially like there's a lot of this is some more future NFL stuff, but like if Dallas has a down year, if the Chargers have a down year, like there could be some really great opportunities for
Mhm.
Brian Johnson if he maximizes this season with Philly to become an NFL head coach as soon as next season.
Yeah. I I've loved Brian Johnson like
Yeah.
my entire life. Like
How can you not?
one of my first memories is actually watching him play in the Sugar Bowl. So it's like
Mhm.
I've like grown up with him and stuff. And so for him to get this like offensive coordinator position at the highest level is like it's something that I know makes Utah fans proud. Like they're like that's our former quarterback, like woo.
Mhm.
And like if you really think about it, he has like worked his way up. Like
Yeah.
obviously He was the quarterback's coach at Utah. Then
Mhm.
he was the offensive coordinator at Utah.
Yep.
Wasn't the best. Then he went to Mississippi State and was at
Mhm.
Mississippi State for a couple years. Then he went to Houston and he was the offensive coordinator there. And then he went to Florida and then he was hired from Florida to the Eagles in 21. So it's like he's really like
Mhm.
worked his way up the ranks. And it's like one of those feel good stories where you're like,
Yes.
yeah, like look at you, woo. And I think if we were talking about like Brian Johnson being like an offensive coordinator, like if we are having this conversation about will Brian Johnson be an offensive coordinator at the next level after he left Utah in 2013, I think the consensus would be no.
Absolutely.
Because he struggled at Utah.
Mhm.
It wasn't a good run. Like it was just not a good look. But if you really think about it, like he was so young in his coaching career at
Yes.
that point that like there's only so much being a former player can like help you with
Mhm.
at that point. And so I think him really grinding it out, working at multiple different programs in multiple different conferences over multiple different years, like the more experience the better. It's kind of like any like job that you're like really focusing on. Like if you're like into like the tech field, for example, like you're going to work on like fine tuning your skills, but like you might go and take like programming classes over here or like programming classes over here because you're going to learn different things from each one.
Mhm.
And so I think having him in those different multitude of programs and like franchises, even with the Eagles, like it's doing good. And I know like Philadelphia fans actually like him a lot. And I think that
They
that's
should.
something you usually see like a lot of like play like teams in the NFL, like their fans, like especially their position coaches, they're like, well, he's not good. Like, why
Mhm.
is it meh, meh, meh?
Philly already flipped on their defensive coordinator after the
Yeah,
Super
they
Bowl.
did. They said, "You got us to the Super Bowl." I bye. And like he was like gone.
Mhm.
So it's interesting how this is like I'm excited for him. I'm happy for him. I'm
Yes.
excited to see what he does with Jalen Hurts because like I think one of the biggest things about being a good offensive coordinator is having a good relationship with your quarterback.
Mhm.
You see it at Utah with Andy Ludwig and Cam
Yes.
Rising, and I think this is what Philly needs. They have a great relationship with Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts, so I think that's just going to provide dividends on the field. And also, it's not like they're bringing in somebody brand new. Like,
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if Brian like keeps a good chunk of the stuff that was already in the playbook,
If
or
it ain't
like
broke, don't fix it. They made the Super Bowl.
yeah,
Yeah.
if it's broke, don't fix it, like, you're fine, like,
Mhm.
so I don't think there's gonna be any major changes, I
Mhm.
don't think, like I don't think we're gonna see Jalen Hurts take, like and their offense just take, like, a massive, like, nosedive
Yeah.
after this season because, like, Brian was in-house. He knows the program, he knows the franchise, he knows the players, he knows, like, what their skill sets are, stuff like
Mhm.
that, so it's like I love this hire. I think it's great. I'm so happy for Brian.
Yes.
I think this is one of those like Utah players that really like crosses the divide of all Utah
Mhm.
fans because like there's some players that like people are kind of like split on,
Yeah.
and
You're right.
I think that Brian Johnson is like two of them are on the Eagles. Brian Johnson and Britton Covey. Those are the two that kind of like merge that like that chasm that splits
Mhm.
Utah fans at times. So I love it. I'm happy for Brian. I think this is great. I'm happy for the Eagles. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for his family. Like, fly birds fly. I think that's what they say. I'm not
Fly Eagles
sure,
fly,
but
but I got you.
fly
Yeah.
Eagles fly. Okay, we were close. We got 2 out of the 3 words
Yes.
there. So,
I do think too with this whole situation, one of the things that makes Brian Johnson so easy to root for is, as you mentioned, like he wasn't supposed to be. He wasn't
mhm,
supposed to be an NFL offensive coordinator. It didn't work out as a college one. So why would you think then after that had happened that it worked there? But it also speaks to the point as you were talking about with jobs. Like a lot of people, when they first get an opportunity and they sometimes don't work at it, they can learn from that experience, they can grow, and then they can eventually become worthy of something even better than that. We see that happen a lot of times, especially in the NFL right now, where these coaches and coordinators are getting these jobs when they're so young. I think a couple of these
mhm,
guys, we're going to look even like 15 years down from the road now because some of them, they're not all going to work. We know it's the fact only one team wins the dang Super Bowl each year. So some of these guys aren't going to work out. They might go somewhere else and then they'll become offensive coordinators too. And I think the other
mhm.
last thing we'll hit on with this too is Brian Johnson. I think one of the reasons that him and Jalen work so well together is neither of them were supposed to be here. I mean, I still
Oh,
remember
yeah.
when he got benched for Tua, and that was the right decision at the time. I mean, he was not playing well in that championship game, so they benched him. But then Jalen absolutely bought in, dedicated. So it's been so much fun to see them have that success together. And yeah, barring injuries or like retirements, because I know Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey both could potentially
Mhm.
walk away, and those are obviously two borderline Hall of
Yeah.
Famers. I think Jason definitely is a Hall of Famer at center. that would be the only thing that would step them back. But I expect them both to have big years next year. And speaking of big years, the Utah offense is going to be for a big year because we know Andy Ludwig is staying with Utah. But there were also some rumors that someone else might be leaving Utah that wasn't Andy Ludwig, that's on the offensive coaching staff. And that was Jim Harding. I think there was a lot of fear amongst Utah fans. Sammy, we talked about this before we recorded, that because Harry Heston, I apologize if I mispronounced his name, announced that he was retiring. There was a lot of speculation of like, okay, is Jim Harding going to then end up at Notre Dame too? Because Notre Dame needs an offensive line coach. And while he would have been an excellent choice for an offensive coordinator or offensive line coach for the Fighting Irish, I don't think Jim Harding was going to leave this team. And I think that was more so just the fear of losing Ludwig kind of bleeding over into other things, Sammy. I'm very happy that they're both staying here. This Utah offense is better for it. And I still believe that, look, we don't know what the future, like long term for Andy Ludwig is going to be. I'd be surprised if he's here 10 years from now, but I would not be surprised at all if 10 years from now, Jim Harding is the offensive coordinator of this Utah football team.
Yeah, and I think the reason why Utah fans like thought that if Ludwig goes, Harding goes, is because of the
Yep.
type of offense that Ludwig runs.
Mhm.
It's very like based in the trenches. It's a lot of run heavy with like the play action. Like you have a lot of options with it, and so like, and also this is not even just like a Ludwig thing. Like most offenses, like it needs to start in the offensive line. And then you
Absolutely.
can kind of like work your way out. And like
Yeah.
Utah was one of the best offensive lines in the Pac-12 this year, like
Mhm.
in terms of like sack percentages, stuff like that. Like they're no Oregon. They're no Oregon. I
Yep.
will say like
Mhm.
Oregon's like the premier, but like Utah was in that like top half of the conference in terms of like offensive line production. And I think Harding deserves a lot more credit than he gets at times.
Absolutely.
Like I know like
I can
there's
tell you've been
always
hanging out with Brian, by the way.
there's always one or
He's
two
smiling
games.
somewhere right now.
There's always like one or two games a year, or like
Mhm.
maybe like last year. No, was it last year or was it the year
Well, the
before?
USC game, the
The
first time
US.
around, USC came
Mhm,
into that game leading the nation in sacks. Utah didn't
mhm.
give up any.
Yeah, and it's like there was that like I think it was it might have been the 21 season. It was the 21 season where the first couple of games the offensive line looked like
Yep.
crap and everyone was like Harding needs to go, like get rid of him.
Mhm.
This offensive line sucks. And then he wins offensive line coach of the year like
Yep.
by the end of the season because it was just a matter of like mixing and matching players, like, it's like
Shuffling.
a puzzle, it's a
Yep.
puzzle, you
Bama
gotta
was
find.
sunny. Mhm.
Yeah, you gotta find the pieces that fit with each other to
Yep.
make the offensive line, and he just had there were some issues that year, there was injuries, there was people, like, leaving, there was, like, transfers, there was a lot of stuff going on in that 21 season, and if you look at this season, like, this 22 season, like, that offensive line was good, like, you had a couple of little, like, substitutions here and there, you had players go down with injuries,
Mhm.
and, like, honestly, like, I know people were worried when Paul Miley announced he was transferring, but, like, if you really think about it, his 2 backups, there was no drop off in production
Yep.
when Miley went down. So
Yep.
I'm
Maya
not
looked
like
awesome. Mhm.
that's nothing I'm like, yeah, you gotta worry about like not worry, but like who's gonna fill the role of Braden Daniels? Because that was the conversation we had the year before
Yeah.
was who's gonna replace Nick Ford. So it's like you're always gonna have that cycle of like, okay, well, who are we gonna replace now? And like Harding has stepped up and has like
Mhm.
had those guys ready. And like that he like always tries to have his offensive line like 2 to 3 deep on every single
Yep.
position at any given point in the season. Like, I don't know like, maybe like, I don't know how many offensive line coaches would have it that deep.
Yeah.
Usually, you'll have, like, okay, well, we have here's our 2 deep, but then we have, like, a couple of reserves that are gonna be ready just in case, but, like, Harding's, like he's like, bam, 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 like, he has everything set up on that line. So I think that's why people were worried because, like,
Yeah.
that's the other thing that sometimes, like, there's one game you're gonna hate a coach, but then the next game you're gonna love that
Oh,
coach,
yeah.
and it's just because of the opponent you're lining up against. Different
Mhm.
schemes, different situations you have to deal with. It's just a lot. And so I think keeping Harding and, like, obviously the bigger win in this situation is keeping Ludwig here in Salt
Yep.
Lake because if they lost him before this season, like, that is,
Yeah, losing it
sound
to
the
the caller.
alarms, like,
Mhm.
it's like the ship is going down already kinda
Yep.
thing because, like, you have so many guys that came back for this final season. So it's like you just it's that's the bigger win in this situation. I just wanna, like I know Utah fans know that, but, like,
Yeah.
this is the bigger win is keeping Ludwig here in the current
Yep.
moment because there was no, like it was rumored that Harding was gonna go, but it was never, like, confirmed that Harding was gonna
Yeah, there
go.
was never any
There
major
was never
concern
any,
from
like,
Notre Dame.
verbal, like, "Hey, Harding's going," like, it was
Mhm.
always just kind of like
It was fear
hey,
taking over.
like possibly there's a chance that if Ludwig goes, Harding's gonna go with him. So,
Mhm.
but
But
yeah,
either way, it works out for Utah now. They're both still with the team, and they're set up for success in 2023. You know what else is setting up for success for 2023 in terms of postseason play? That's the Utah women's basketball team. We're going to come back and talk about them in a
woo!
moment because they have been absolutely dominant on the floor. Currently, the fourth ranked team in women's Division One basketball. It's the highest ranking they've ever held. We are going to talk about them in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at RC Willie. RC Willie is hiring delivery drivers in Salt Lake area. If you're looking for a rewarding career with a great group of people, come work for RC Willie. Utah's largest home furnishing store, RC Willie, is currently hiring for delivery drivers at their warehouses by the Salt Lake City airport. Delivery drivers are the face of RC Willie, and they're looking for great delivery drivers in the northern Utah area. Compensation for delivery drivers is $24 an hour during training, and our average delivery driver makes $50,000 to $80,000 per year. RC Willie offers $1,000 sign-on bonus and hands-on training, including CDL training, but no CDL is required right away. Many of their employees have been with them for over 20 years too. With a modern fleet of delivery trucks, RC Willie prides themselves on going the extra mile for their customers and their employees. RC Willie associates say they love their job and the benefits are great, and the culture at RC Willie is one of the best. Come make a difference and join America's home furnishing store of choice. Apply online at rcwillie.com/jobs. That's rcwillie.com/jobs. Sammy, this turnaround for this Utah women's basketball program from I think back to the starting point of the 2021 season to the 2022-2023 season now, when Lynn Roberts' job starting that 2021 season was kind of still up in the air. Utah women's
Mhm.
basketball has struggled, and now she's already a finalist for one of the Coach of the Year awards, as she absolutely should be, helping this team become top four. Gianna Neatkins, Jenna Johnson have both done a great job continuing to grow their games in their second year. Alyssa Powell, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Sammy. I don't think there's a transfer player, portal of the year player, but I think if there was, I think Alyssa Powell would absolutely win it because she
Oh
has been
yeah.
a force for this Utah team.
Oh yeah.
They have been sensational. You got to love the way they move the ball. 22-2 overall. They got some huge games coming up against Arizona, and then about 2 weeks from now, the 25th, they'll take on Stanford too. It is going to be an absolute fun way to see how that all goes down for this Utah women's basketball team, and they are an absolute juggernaut.
Oh yeah. And like you said, like this has been a thing that's been developing the last couple of
Mhm.
years, I'll say. Like last year they started picking up steam. Like they made it to the tournament last
Yeah,
year. They did lose. They did lose in like they lost to
but they
Texas.
won a game in the tournament.
They did win it the end. They made
Mhm,
it to the second round, but they did lose. So it's like they
mhm.
made it to the tournament, which was huge progress for Lynn. They made it to the Pac-12 championship game that year too. They did end up losing to Stanford, but like
Yep.
first ever appearance in a Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah.
You made it to the tournament. You won a game in the tournament, and you made it to the second round. Like those are four big accomplishments in 1 year. And I think there's been a lot of things that have been like different from last year's team to this year's team, but I think the biggest of which is Alyssa Powell.
Mhm. Agreed.
She is just she is a monster. Like Lynn has talked about how like Alyssa was the thing that they were missing because they had the shooters on the outside, but they didn't have
Yep.
somebody on defense. And so I think Alyssa was that key that they needed. Um, she's averaging 20 and a half points per game, 5.5 rebounds over like 5.8. She's
Yep.
just an absolute like monster. She leads the team in scoring. Like she's just so good. And like if we want to talk about clutch performances, Alyssa Powell has had
Oh, yeah.
two at games that have happened at the Huntsman Center. The first one was the first time that Utah played Arizona. She
Mhm.
hit two free throws, one to tie the game and one to win the game with like 0.08 seconds left or something like that. Like she drew the foul, got the free throws and drained both. And then was it last weekend or was it a couple weekends ago, she
UCLA.
hit the UCLA. She hit the
Mhm.
game-winning layup. Like she is so good. And like I joke about this that like Lynn's game plan every game is like, "Hey, just get the ball to Alyssa. Get the ball to Alyssa and like let her do what she needs to do." But if you look at their stats against Washington last Friday, they had 16 three-pointers. There was like 5 or 6 girls who all had one, including Izzy Palmer, who drained it from beyond half
Mhm.
court going into halftime. So it's like this is a team that they're fun to watch.
Yep.
They're really good. They have a very good chance of hosting NCAA tournament games at the Huntsman Center if everything goes to plan. This game against Arizona is big on Friday. Like
Very much so.
you need to get the win there. But then you go to Arizona State, who is the worst in the conference. So you go from one of the best in the conference to Arizona State, who has not won a game in conference. like Utah hasn't even played against Arizona State this year because when they were supposed to come to Salt Lake, they forfeited
Right.
because of the injuries. So like that, if you can get out of Arizona 2-0, like you're high flying. You are
Yep.
flying high heading into that final week of the season. You know, you have Cal at home, but then everyone here's my thing. This is I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second and I'm going to say something. Utah fans, go to the game on Saturday. It's at noon.
25th.
The 25th. It is $4 tickets right now. GA, general admission.
Uh-huh.
This game is probably going to determine who's the number 1 seed in the Pac-12 tournament.
Yep.
Like, go out, watch this game. They're a good team. Like, you're going to watch
They're a great team.
they're a great team. You're going to get to watch some really, really, really good basketball. You're going to get to watch basically like 2 national title contenders if you're talking based on rankings. Like 3 and 4 are going at it. So that's my little soapbox moment. So Utah fans, like, go out, go watch the women's basketball game. It's $4. Take your kids, take your family, like just hang out, go to the basketball game for a day because you can't use the NFL as an excuse. There's no NFL. So it's like there's the biggest like hurdle out of the way. So go out and support the not the gymnastics team. Go out and support the gymnastics team.
Support them too.
Like,
they're doing pretty good too.
They're doing great. But like go out and support the women's basketball team because like you have 2 more chances to see this team before the tournament, before like March Madness, unless you go down to Vegas and watch them. But like this is the start of the campaign now to like pack the Huntsman for the Stanford game. Like everyone needs to get out and go watch these girls. Like they're fun. They are fun.
And I fully endorse your campaign as well because this team deserves support. They have been dominant all season long. I mean, only lose 2 games is absolutely incredible. This season started in November. Think about how different things are just in terms everything from November going on. Think about the position Utah football was in. Over the course of all of that to here now, late in February, this team has lost 2 games. That's incredible. Yeah. Regardless of what happens at Arizona, we know what's going to happen at Arizona State, as we just talked about, and then we'll go into the other ones too. So this Utah women's basketball team is in a great position, and they absolutely deserve your guys' support. So make sure you guys head out to that one on the 25th too. It's a great time to be a Utah basketball fan in general right now. The men's team's on the rise a little bit more too, but the women's team in particular is the best basketball team up on the hill. So make sure you guys get out and support them for that big showdown they have coming up. Appreciate Sammy Morra for joining us with UteZone. If you guys want to get more of her content, make sure you guys head over to UteZone.com. They have podcasts and a ton of great written content available at UteZone.com. Also, if you guys are in the market for a second listen every day, we recommend you check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. It's their brand new podcast on the Locked On Network. Has everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you can hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Sammy, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.